Henry's Freedom Box, a true story from the Underground Railroad. This book is by Levine and it's illustrated by Kadir Nelson.
Box.
Henry Brown wasn't sure how old he was. Henry was a slave and slaves weren't allowed to know their birthdays.
He's sitting on a barrel.
He is sitting on a barrel.
He's so funny.
He is so funny.
So like me, I'm more sillier.
You are more silly. Henry and his brothers and sisters worked in the big house where the master lived. Henry's master had been good to Henry and his family, but Henry's mother knew things could change. Do you see those leaves blowing in the wind? They are torn from the trees like slave children are torn from their families. You see the leaves?
Yeah, the cherry.
Yeah.
I still like cherry leaves.
You do like tearing leaves. One morning, the master called for Henry and his mother. They climbed the wide staircase. The master lay in a bed with only his head above the quilt. He was very ill. He beckoned them to come closer. Some slaves were freed by their owners. Henry's heart beat fast. Maybe the master would set them free. But the master said, "You are a good worker, Henry. I'm giving you to my son. You must obey him and never tell a lie." Henry nodded, but he didn't say thank you. That would have been a lie. Later that day, Henry watched a bird soar high above the trees. Free bird, happy bird, Henry thought. Henry said goodbye to his friend. Some birds are sad. He looked across the field. The birds swirled, the leaves swirled in the wind. You see everybody hugging?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some birds are silly.
Some are silly, kind of like you are silly. Here, come pay attention. Henry worked in his new master's factory. He was good at his job. "Do not tear that tobacco leaf," the boss yelled at the new boy. He poked the boy with a stick. "If you make a mistake, the boss will beat you." Henry was lonely. One day he met Nancy, who was shopping for her mistress. They walked and talked and agreed to meet again. Henry felt like singing, but slaves didn't dare sing in the streets. Instead, he hummed all the way home. Months later, Henry asked Nancy to be his wife. When both their masters agreed, Henry and Nancy were married. Soon there was a little baby, then another and another. Like you see the little kids and you see the baby?
Yeah.
Henry knew they were very lucky. They lived together even though they had different masters. But Nancy was worried. Her master had lost a great deal of money. "I'm afraid he will sell our children," she said. Henry sat very still. Henry worked hard all morning. He tried to forget what Nancy had said. You see Henry?
Yeah.
He's thinking.
Yeah, he's grown up.
He is a grown-up now. His friend James came into the factory. He whispered to Henry. Their wife and children were just sold at the slave market. "No," cried Henry. He couldn't move. He couldn't think. He couldn't work. "Twist that tobacco," the boss poked Henry. Henry twisted tobacco leaves. His heart twisted in his chest.
His back hurts.
Well, his back hurts. His heart is hurting too. At lunchtime, Henry rushed to the center of town. A large group of slaves was tied together. The owners shouted at them.
A lot.
Yes, a lot.
I think I can fix that.
I don't know if you could fix this.
I think so.
You do.
Uh,
Henry looked for his family. "Father, Father!" Henry watched his children disappear down the road. Where was Nancy? He saw her the same moment she saw him. He wiped away his tears. Nancy, too, was gone. You see the children? Henry no longer sang. He couldn't hum. He went to work and at night he ate supper and went to bed. Henry tried to think of happy times, but all he could see were the carts carrying away everyone he loved. Henry knew he would never see his family again. Many weeks passed. One morning, Henry heard singing. A little bird flew out of a tree into the open sky, and Henry thought about being free. But how? As he lifted a crate, he knew the answer. He asked James and Dr. Smith to help him. Dr. Smith was a white man who thought slavery was wrong. They met early the next day at an empty warehouse. Henry arrived with the box. You see the box? "I will mail myself to a place where there are no slaves," he said. James stared at the box, then at Henry. "What if you cough and someone hears you?" "I will cover my mouth and hope," Henry said. Dr. Smith wrote on the box, to William H. Johnson, Arch Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Henry would be delivered to friends in Philadelphia. Then he printed on the crate in big letters, this side up with care. You can turn a page, thank you. Henry needed an excuse to stay home, or the work boss would think he had run off. James pointed to Henry's sore finger. But Henry knew it wasn't bad enough. He opened a bottle of oil of vitriol. No, cried James. Henry poured it on his hand. It burned his skin to the bone. Now the boss would have to let him stay home. Dr. Smith bandaged Henry's hand. They arranged to meet the next morning at 4 o'clock. You see his bandage?
That's pretty big.
It is pretty big.
I can lift it up.
You can lift anything.
Yeah.
The sun was not up yet when Henry climbed into the box. Ready, he said. James nailed down the lid. Dr. Smith and James drove to the station. The railway clerk tipped the box over and nailed a paper to the bottom. Dr. Smith begged the clerks to be careful, but they didn't listen. They threw the box into the baggage car. Turn the page. Hours passed. Henry was lifted up and thrown again, upside down. He heard waves splashing. This must be the steamboat headed for Washington, D.C. The ship rode smoothly, but Henry was still upside down. Blood rushed to his head. His face got hot. His eyes ached. He thought his head would burst, but he was afraid to move. Someone might hear him.
He's silly.
I'm tired of standing, someone said. Why don't we move that box and sit on it, said another. Henry held his breath. Could they be talking about his box? Henry was pushed. The box scraped the deck. Now he was on his right side. Now on his left. And suddenly, right side up.
Then upside down.
He had been upside down.
He's very hot now.
Yeah, he is hot because he's in the box.
Oh.
What do you think is in here, said the first man. Mail, I guess, said the other. I am mail, thought Henry, but not the kind they imagined. Henry was carried off the steamboat and placed in a railroad car, this time head up. He fell asleep to the rattling song of the train wheels. He awoke to loud knocking. Henry, are you all right in there? All right, he answered. The cover was pried open. Henry stretched and stood up. 4 men smiled at him. Welcome to Philadelphia. At last, Henry had a birthday. March 30th, 1849, his first day of freedom. And from that day on, he also had a middle name. Everyone called him Henry Box Brown. Hold on. Look, he's coming out of the box. The end.